This week we finally get to start working with images in our HTML, and that's a good thing because without images in our web pages, they tend to be a little mundane, a little bit boring, and images will add a little life to the work we're doing. So make sure you read over the information on page 130 and 131. You don't have to memorize it all. Keep that in mind as you're looking through this information that we're covering in the class. It's not expected that you memorize all the different file types or memorize all the different values or properties that go along with HTML. What I want you to do is be aware of them, understand how they're used, and know that if you run into some roadblocks, there's a lot of resources and references that can help you figure out how to move on to the next step. On page 131, there's a chart that talks about some of the common image formats used on the web today. They include the GIF format, GIF, the JPEG, which is usually either shown as a JPG or a JPEG file, and then the PNG file. They also talk a little bit about an SVG file. For the sake of this class, I'm going to avoid the SVG file because there's not great historical compatibility with that format, and it's just not used as commonly as the other ones. It's something you should be aware of and know about for the future, but for now we're going to focus on GIFs, JPEGs, and PNG formats. So now it's time to start the process of adding your first image. First thing you're asked to do is go to the F-1 HTML file, and we're going to add a tag, P, and our name. And the book asks you to add a designation for the actual assignment name, and I think that's supposed to be HTML5. And then we'll close the P tag, and we're going to save this as an index.html file in the same directory where it was originally stored. Save that, and then we're asked to open a new file, and this particular file we're going to look for in the same location, and that file is going to be the HTMF2 file. That one here, and we're going to add our name down at the bottom just before the body off tag, the previous file. And we're going to save this file as rooms.html. And then we're asked to open one additional file, and that is going to be the CSS file, htmf-3.css. So open that here. And we're going to add a comment with that same information. Comment, remember, in style sheet is a /*. That allows us to put any type of note we'd like to ourselves. And then we close it with an */. Go ahead and save that file as lakeland.css. We're going to go back to the index file first, so I'll open that one right now. Then we're asked to locate the H1 element, and to delete the text, Lakeland reads bed and breakfast, leaving the tags in place. And in that area, we are going to type a new tag, IMG, and that's the image tag. And then SRC, which tells where the image source is going to be coming from, and we're going to be looking for it in a directory called images, and this is a relative link. Okay, so we're actually getting this information, getting the image from somewhere on the server. And the link, remember there's relative and absolute links. Well, this image link is relative. We're not going to give the whole URL where you can find the image, although you could do that. In this case, we're just going to say it's going to be in an images directory, and the name of the image we're looking for is lakeland.gif. Then we're going to close the quote, and we're going to put some additional parameters in here. We're going to actually assign a width to this image of 664. We're going to assign a height 180, and then we're going to add some alt information. And alt information is really important for people who, for whatever reason, cannot see the image. Now, it may be that the image just isn't found on the server. Maybe the person who's administering the server didn't put it in place. It is possible that the internet connection is slow where the user is reading this information, so they may have images turned off in their web browser, or there may be some type of firewall that's preventing images from showing up. By putting the alt tag, it will display this information, Lakeland reads bed and breakfast, in place of the image. Now this can also be really helpful from an accessibility standpoint. Maybe someone who's blind or otherwise visually impaired may not be able to see the image, but if they're using a reader, internet reader, to actually read the web page to them, the reader can read this information. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this file. Then I'm going to go to my web browser and we're going to look at this file to see how we're doing so far. Hey, that's definitely an improvement. We now have an image that's showing up on top of our page, and so it looks like we've made progress there. So even though we now have an image on the page, the image certainly doesn't look like the one on page 133 of your book. Notice how on 133 in your book, this heading information in the image is all on a white background, but here it's showing up as a brown background. And if you think about the fact that earlier in exercises we actually made this area with the H1 tags brown in background, that may make some sense to you. And we'll remove that in a little bit. First I want to take a look at these two dots down here in between the address and the city, and between the city and zip code and the phone number. And let's say we just want to make those dots a little more decorative. Well, we're able to do that by going back to the HTML code, and I'll pull that up right now. And we're going to find those special little dots. They're actually represented by these characters here. And in the instructions in your book, it talks about deleting those characters and adding another image tag. Image src. Remember, that's the place where you're going to find the image, or the image source. And we're going to put in the details that were listed in the book. They're going to be in the images directory, this image that we're looking for. And we're looking for an actual image called flourish.gif. We're going to include the height and width attributes. And we are going to include an alt tag, but we're not going to put any information in the alt tag. Remember how just a moment ago I had talked to you about the alt tag being pretty important when you want to communicate something to someone when they can't see the image? Well, in this case, if the image is not here, it's a little difficult to figure out what exactly you'd want to communicate, because all this image is going to be as a replacement for the dot, kind of a placeholder. Your book asks you to take the same information that you just replaced the one dot with and do the same with the other dot. So I'm just going to copy that HTML code and replace the dot character, paste it right in there, and then I'm going to save my document once again. Now I'll go back to my web browser and reload it. You notice that right now this heading image still is showing up with a brown background. We're going to take care of that in a moment. But you'll also notice this area where the dots used to be, there now are little leaves, little images. So it's a little more decorative than it was just having a dot as a separator. We now have an image as a separator. Let's go back to Notepad, and this time we're going to open up this CSS file. We want to go to the H1 tag. That's where the image is located now, where we used to have the header text. And we want to remove most all of the rules that are within the H1 tag, except for the font size. And then we're asked to add one additional rule. Remember, one of the things I just did was I removed the background color, so that should help take the brown away from the background of that image. We're going to add margin and then a measurement of 0 EM. We'll now save the CSS file, go back to our browser, and what we're hoping to find is that this heading image is now going to be showing up over a white background instead of a brown background. Let's see what happens. And that's what you'd expect, and it should be a pretty close match to what you're seeing on page 133 in your book. Take a look, and if you've completed this exercise successfully, you're ready to move on to the next one.